Okay, so we are recording. Hi, my name is Grace Stern. I am the State Extension Master Gardener Program Coordinator. I am also a master's student in Dr. Kuhar's lab. I'm getting my master's of science in life sciences in the entomology department here at Virginia Tech. This is a component of my master's thesis, but in addition to that, it's a really good opportunity for our volunteers to get engaged in citizen science in Virginia. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint briefly, and there's also an excellent web page that I will close out of the PowerPoint and show you guys the web page later, which is probably where you found the registration link. I wanted to introduce the members of my committee. So I have Ed Olson, who is our program director for the State Extension Master Gardener Program in Virginia. Dr. Kemper Sutton, who is an extension entomologist on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and Dr. Tom Kuhar, who is an extension entomologist on campus in Blacksburg. So Allium Leafminer is a pest of allium plants, which includes onions, shallots, garlic, leeks, chives, and ornamental alliums. This pest causes some what we would call aesthetic damage, but it does also cause a great deal of damage to the edible plant parts. It affects salability and storage of alliums in Virginia. And this is going to be a very brief overview of the project, how to scout for it, and some other considerations. The first picture I want to show you is very zoomed in. There are plenty of pictures on the website. This is a leek leaf, and those little circles, the little dots that you see along the leaf are oviposition scars. So oviposition happens when a female insect lays an egg. In this case, she lays the eggs in the leaves of allium plants. You're going to see this picture a lot because this is what I want you to be identifying when you're scouting. We're not asking for identification beyond this. So life cycle of allium leaf miner in Virginia. This pest has a summer diapause or estivation period, which means that it's not active during the summer. It's also not active during the winter. So you can see where we are right here in February. The insect is dormant in this pupal stage. So it has, from the fall life cycle, the eggs have traveled down the vascular tissue into the bulb and the area around the bulb in the soil. And they're kind of, overwintering in this pupal stage. And soon those pupa will hatch and adults will emerge, which will then fly around, mate, and the females will lay eggs on the leaves and stems of allium plants, which will then turn into larvae, hatch and turn into larvae, and then travel down the stem, become pupa, and be dormant over the summer, and then emerge again for a fall life cycle, and it'll just continue like that. What we're concerned with specifically for this project is where allium leaf miner is in Virginia and when does it emerge, and if there are any seasonal indicators such as forsythia bloom or daffodil bloom that can accurately predict or coincide with allium leaf miner emergence. There's been a lot of work already done on this pest in other states, specifically like more onion producing states, regions with a larger onion, garlic, shallot, leek, ornamental allium industry. But we are in a slightly more southern region. The pest has been detected in Penn State. So Penn State and Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture have our first US report. And any state that has large onion production also has a quarantine for this. So Washington, Oregon, Georgia, I believe, and I think there's another that I'm forgetting, all have quarantines. So this affects our ability to ship onions to other localities. And it does become a business and a trade issue when the plant material that we're trying to sell or purchase has to be subjected to additional inspection. So your role in this is going to be going out and looking at alliums and looking at forsythias and daffodils and filling out a survey for me. And then I'll compile all the data to answer these questions and keep you guys updated. So this is a list of allium species that we have seen injury on from Allium Leafminer. And because that injury is so distinctive, all those little dots in a row, it's very easy to say whether or not something is damaged. So what I would like for you to look for is any cultivated allium plants, which include onions, leeks, garlic, chives. If you have ramps around, if you look for ramps in your region, if you look for ramps in your area, if you have those in your region and you see damage there, that's fine. You can see that we have not seen injury reported on ramps in from this 2017 paper, but we have seen injury on ramps in Virginia. So we have that's not documented in the literature, but we have pictures and lots of field reports from that. So if it's in the allium family and you know of wild alliums or cultivated alliums, that's the plant I want you to be scouting. Also, this does affect ornamental alliums. So if you have any of those lovely ornamental alliums in your gardens or community gardens, just take a look there as well. So your role in discovering where Allium Leafminer is in Virginia is to just look for the oviposition damage and report through the form on our website. I need you to report both presence and absence. This has just as much to do with knowing where Allium Leafminer is as it does with when Allium Leafminer emerges. It's hard to say that Allium Leafminer is here and not there if we don't have any negative reports. So I need those negative reports as well. I also need that if you scout the same patch of onions, say you have a row or two or a section of your garden that you have onions, garlic, shallots, anything like that at home, and you're checking them regularly, we want to know when Allium Leafminer emerges. So in that situation, I would want you to report absence every time you go out and scout. And then if you do ever see oviposition damage, then report presence when you do initially see presence the first time, because that will help us track when the insect is laying eggs, which will be a little bit before when you see the damage by a couple of days. And then there will be a week or so, maybe a little bit more between the time that the female mates and lays eggs or emerges and lays eggs. And we want to know when they emerge from either pupa and fly. So the more accurate information we have about when Allium Leafminer isn't there versus when it is there helps us kind of track that more accurately across the state. There's almost no such thing as too much data. So if you go out every 3 days or so and look at your alliums and say, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here. If you go out every day, I'm all right with that if you're using the digital form. If you're using the paper form, I have to look through all of those. So maybe refrain from that if you're using the paper form. But it's really important for us to have both presence and absence data to answer all of our questions. Again, this is a picture of oviposition damage. That is what you're looking for. I don't need you to look for the pest. I'm not expecting you to be able to identify the pest at any of its life stages. I'm expecting you to identify damage. I'm also, and there is a question in the scouting form and in the scouting standard operating procedures, I do want to know what's in bloom. And so I want to see if that forsythia bloom and that daffodil bloom coincide with Leafminer emergence, which is another reason why we need presence and absence data. But by reporting whether or not something's in bloom or pre-bloom, post-bloom, or full bloom, I think I have it set up as 50% bloom, more than 50%, less than 50%. not blooming or done blooming. And that will help me line up the dates of emergence and flight of Allium Leafminer with average bloom of daffodils and forsythias. And I know that for the majority of the volunteers participating in this project, it's very easy to identify daffodils and forsythias, and we have enough of them prevalent in the landscape that it is a really accessible tool. There's a possibility that they don't coincide, and that's okay, but we want to know for sure. So there's a really easy way to say, oh, our daffodils are blooming, and that must mean that Allium Leafminer is, 1 week away, 2 weeks away, whatever that might be. We do have functional degree day models, which predict Allium Leafminer flight and emergence that were developed in Pennsylvania in similar hardiness zones to the western part of Virginia. We will be trying to validate those in Virginia, but that's not something that we need additional volunteer help with at this time. Just would really like to have an additional tool in our toolkit that's easy to use, like our daffodils and forsythias blooming. So I want to show you some more identifications. So this is the adult. It's a fly. It's in Diptera, which means that it has 2 true wings, and that number 3 is pointing to a haltere, which is a modified hind wing. And that's one feature to identify between flies and other flying insects, is that they have 2 wings and they have this white haltere here, or smaller modified wing there. There are yellow areas on the top of the head and on the knees. The yellow-orange knees are pretty characteristic. This is for your general education and knowledge. I don't need you to identify Allium Leafminer in the field or even under a scope, but I'm assuming that for those of you that are participating in this project, you do have an entomology interest, so I wanted to share some more features. Allium Leafminer larva is a maggot. It's a dipteran pest, so it's a fly, and it is not overwhelmingly distinctive in the larval stage. This is what it looks like. In the pupal stage, that's what it looks like. That little brown pupal stage, also not significantly distinctive. The adult is distinctive, but again, the oviposition damage is what I want you guys to look for, and it is very distinctive. This is a picture of oviposition damage on chives. You're going to see a lot of those holes or little white marks of necrotic tissue in a row along the stems. And you might also see some other yellowing, curling, other damage like we've seen. I'm going to go back to a previous picture. You saw in this picture, there's some other damage or injury to this plant that could be attributed to lots of different things, but it does have this oviposition damage. And now I'll go back to the end of our webinar. If you have questions about this project, this is a good time to ask them, but I have an email address set up specifically for this project. It is allium@vt.edu. That comes to me. It's a good way for me to sort through questions and keep them separate from the hat that I wear as the State Extension Master Gardener Program Coordinator. I am going to stop sharing my PowerPoint screen here, and I'm going to open a web page for Allium Leafminer in Virginia. So I'm going to share my screen again. So this is on the State Extension Master Gardener website. This is mastergardener.ext.vt.edu/Allium Leafminer. If you Google Allium Leafminer, Virginia Extension Master Gardener, or Virginia EMG, this will pop up. I will also be sending this out in some other forms to recruit more volunteers. And I do have a better impact activity template for this already structured for our volunteers so they can record and report hours for this. When we're done recording this webinar and I've captioned it and everything, I will be adding the recorded training webinar to this webpage as well. I will add additional resources, reference material, project updates to this web page. This is your landing page for everything to do with this project. There's some overview, there's additional pictures, including pictures of Allium Leafminer on ramps, some additional reference material if you're interested, and project timeline, this phenomenal picture from this graphic of the life cycle is from Cornell University. I use that in my PowerPoint. I think it does a really good job of illustrating that. I have our project timeline on there, and as suggested by a fellow extension agent, she named our team the Scouting Scallions. So if you're interested in Scouting Scallions and other alliums, there's information about how to get involved here. So there is a digital version of our scouting survey. There's a scouting procedures document, and there's a paper version of our scouting survey. I'm going to show you the digital version of the scouting survey just so you can see what it looks like. If you want to kind of like look through it a little bit and not submit an observation, that's okay. The same exact questions are on the paper form as the digital form. So it's perfectly acceptable to send in a paper form and mail them to my office, and that information is on the website. But it's significantly easier for me to track data through this digital form. So every time you scout, even if it's the same plant, I want you to record an observation. We talked about the need for tracking when the pest is and is not active, and when we do and do not see oviposition injury. And I would like you to record every time. If you go for a walk around a community garden and you see, you know, onions and chives and shallots, and then you see ramps on your walk home, you can log all of them. That's useful to me. If you scout everything regularly and you kind of have a system for it, you'll get really used to using the form. There are not a ton of questions, but they are important. So I want you to record your host plant, the date of the observation, and the physical location of the observation. It's important that you use as specific information as possible because I will be developing a heat map for Virginia. Qualtrics does record the address, or not the address, the coordinates of where you submitted the survey from. But unless you're standing over the plant and hitting send and it all goes through with the internet perfectly at that time, that's not going to be the best way to collect location data. So I can handle a physical address if you know the coordinates, especially if you have a plot that you're going to be repeatedly scouting, add the coordinates. I will follow up if we have positive identification, if I've got questions about anything. And so if you just put your email in every time, that'll be really useful to me. This is the link that's available is anonymous. The only way I have to get back in touch with you after you submit the survey is this email box. So it's required. You do have to put that in. Then we ask, have you seen oviposition scarring? If you say yes, it will ask you some additional questions. So I'm just going to say yes for now. It's going to ask you to attach a photo, which is for me for verification, and also so I have a wonderful extensive bank of photos when I'm presenting, and also how many plants are affected at that location, the number of plants that you see oviposition damage on at that location. It's if it becomes cumbersome to count all of the plants at your location ahead of time, just don't worry too much about it. I just need to know if it's one instance on one plant, or if you have a whole garden full of alliums and there are all over your alliums. That pressure level is important to me, that pest pressure level. And then there's a section we're calling bioindicator validation. There's probably a better word for it than bioindicator, but I'm going to ask you to record the bloom stage of daffodils and forsythias. And those would be the daffodils and forsythias closest to the area that you're scouting. If you live, 45 minutes away in the city and your daffodils are blooming, it's probably warmer in an urban environment than it is in maybe a rural environment. So just be conscious of this as you're scouting. And that's it. That's it. Nothing additional to that in terms of scouting. And I'm trying to make it as simple as possible so it remains fun. I also have written scouting procedures for you guys as you do this, but it's not complicated. It's easier than logging your hours in Better Impact, and it's easier than checking all the boxes for your qualifications to be a Master Gardener volunteer. It's certainly easier than your training class. So with that, I'm stopped sharing my screen. Does anybody have questions about the project, the purpose, the logistics? Is there anything that I'm missing that I haven't included that you guys would like to have? A resource that I could develop for you guys? Floor is open.
Um, Grace, it's Chris Cook in Norfolk. I sent you a note in the chat, but if we come across an infected plant, should we remove the plant and dispose of it properly?
I don't know. So it's not regulated in Virginia. It's not, um, it's certainly a threat to allium production, but we don't have a big enough industry. If that brings you joy, I see no reason to keep it. There's no reason to keep an infected plant with an invasive insect pest on it, but it's not regulated. It's not under quarantine in Virginia. And in fact, VDAX hasn't officially said that it's here yet. So even though we do know that it's here, that's part of why we're doing the mapping project. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't remove it from public property, but if I had it in my own crop at home, I would. Yeah.
Yeah, don't go dig up the ornamental alliums at Lewis Ginter or Green Spring. Bad idea. You can go, hey, look, I found some, right? But it might be interesting to see how I had a producer who does some foraging of ramps, and they've reported a decreased number of ramps in their forested land over the years as their allium leaf miner pressure on their commercial vegetable operation increases. They've also seen that wild host is suffering. So it might be interesting for science, but I don't care what you do with them. Tom, do you care what they do with them?
No, I don't think from a regulatory thing that it's necessary, but I will mention, Chris, and I'm Tom Kuhar from campus entomology professor. We speaking to a farm and some farmers in Hillsville area who have been dealing with this pest, and they do produce onions, and it's an organic farm, that they don't always lose the onion crop. Um, Now they're battling it, and it can be a pest, but it's possible that you get some oviposition and you get some infestation, but yet you still get an onion out of it or a garlic out of it. But the top part of the plant ultimately succumb to. So that, I'd hate if you've got a limited amount of onions that you just you just got rid of your when you could have had a good onion out of it. So I guess just use that as kind of but that being said, I also think noting that a plant had the oviposition marks and then what became of it would be really good anecdotal data that to know that like when you see this, 50, 60, 70% of the time that ended up being something you had to throw away. Like that would be really, really good information. Now that's added work and all that, but it is kind of addresses your question. Like if I see it, what do I do with it? I
Right.
would let it go, but watch it and you'll learn for yourself. And then I guess report that to Grace because that's ultimately we're trying to just come with good information for everyone else a year and 2 years from now we're just trying to educate ourselves and educate everyone else that and that would be very good information.
Yeah, I mean, I've got leeks in my own raised beds at home, but I also do a lot of my volunteer work at the potager garden at the Norfolk Botanical Gardens, and we have leeks. We've got garlic, and so I'll be able to do observations in both those areas in the city. So
I think that'll be really useful. And that's exactly, and it's not to say that you can't scout wild alliums or, or anything else, but that would be my advice if you wanted to like initiate this project locally, is to find somewhere where they're grown and you know that they're there, get the location for that, get the coordinates for that, and then you're not running all over looking for alliums and looking if it brings you joy to go all over God's creation looking for allium plants and looking for damage on allium plants and having a big map, that's fine. But it's just as valuable to have like regular consistent data at the same location over time for the purposes of this.
thank you.
And Grace, your audio, I don't know if anyone else, but it's starting to fade. It's real faint. I don't know if something happened to your mic, but
Just not a good mic.
okay.
Other questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I am wondering, because I'm growing shallots and onions in my yard, but I also have a plot at the community garden. If I see something in either one of those, should I send a separate sheet?
Yes.
Okay.
Because they're in two different locations, and the location is important. So send a different report for each of those each time you look.
All right. Thank you. Oh, and one other quick question. Do they spread? Because that's something I need to know. Like if I see it, say at the community garden, should I be careful, like not bringing it? I mean, I should, but how likely is that?
They don't fly very far. They're flies, so they don't, it's not like, birds and stuff like that. Check your tools, your shoes, stuff like that, in case there are pupa and soil matter that might get stuck between the treads of your boots if you're really worried about it. I would not take, if you were to start from seed, onions at home, or shallots or anything at home, I would not take those and put them in the community garden or vice versa, because I think one of the ways that we might see them transfer from location to location is in plant material. But I wouldn't be super worried about it. They're definitely the larvae, the flies, the pupa are big enough that you would be able to see them if when you pull them up to use to harvest. I wouldn't worry about your tools necessarily. You might want to rinse off spades or brush off your gloves and stuff, but it's not like like a fungal disease where we'd be, or a nematode disease where we'd be really worried about like microscopic things that are hard to get rid of or hard to see. So you don't need to do like any big sanitation procedures, unless your community garden partner like wants you to do that. But until you find the pest there, I wouldn't spend a lot of time worried about your sanitation procedures, because you might not have it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was very helpful.
So Grace, I don't know if it's time to bring it up that you may be adjusting your phenological indicators, but Ed brought up some good points about daffodils blooming for a long period and the different varieties and stuff, and maybe
Well,
there's other plants that we add to the list.
yeah, I might add additional seasonal phenology things, like Ed put in the chat, other plants that flower around the time of forsythia, 35 to 53 growing degree days include red maple, Callery pear, and purple dead nettle. I will look into those a little bit more, see if that lines up with what we were thinking for Allium Leafminer emergence, and add those to the survey. There's no additional need to It's okay to add those to the survey. It'll just be more data for us later. Even though it's asking the same question. I got a question in the chat from Betty, what the duration of the project is. I anticipate, so you can find the project timeline on the Allium Leafminer webpage, but I anticipate that you guys can go out and start scouting possibly now, and into the next few weeks, and scout pretty much through to May, and then take a break over the summer and scout in the fall. I don't anticipate needing more than maybe 3 seasons worth of data. I would like to have both spring and fall data and if there is engagement in the project, I have no problem running it again in 2026. But we might have everything we need. We might have enough data and everything we need from this year. So I'm thinking probably a 2-year project on your part. And if there is additional work or components and there is interest from our volunteers, I'd be more than happy to develop other stuff, but there will also be other wonderful community engaged science opportunities through the Extension Master Gardener program. And we don't need to do Allium Leafminer forever. So I do want to graduate and be published, and we do have to put an end date on it at some point. If we don't have more questions, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to stop recording and I will post this on our webpage and send out an email. Again, if you have questions, email me at allium@vt.edu and I can answer both project logistic questions. If you notice that one of the links is broken, anything like that, please let me know. And if you have technical questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But I'm just getting started with this pest. Our department is just getting started with this pest, to try and be a little bit more prepared and proactive for Virginia's industry. So, just let me know if there's anything else you need. That's allium@vt.edu. All right. Thank you, guys.